Alrighty, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Seville Planning Commission for June. I think we're ready to begin our deliberations, and I believe Mr. Palmer from UVA is on. So why don't we begin with reports from the dais, and we'll begin with Bill. Mr. Palmer.
Hey there. Hey. I got a little background noise. I don't have much for this time. Did want to mention there was a Board of Visitors meeting on Friday where they announced a major gift for a new Democracy Institute, the Karsh Family Democracy Institute. And that's just kind of notable for us because that'll lead to probably to another building at the Ivy Emmett corridor to kind of complement what's already under planning there, the Data Science Institute and the hotel and conference center. So that's big news and great news for us. So, but other than that, I don't really have anything else.
Oh, great. That is big news, great news. Ms. Russell.
I do not have any reports.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
I've just got a quick report. So I attended the MPO Tech meeting on May 18th, where we made a recommendation for our Unified Planning Work Program. So what the policy board ended up wanting to do is a study of climate change and how to react to it with our transportation planning. So that should be interesting for the next year. There's also discussion of potential smart scale projects for the 2022 round, where basically the ones under consideration are Avon Street, Fifth Street, a couple around Hydraulic, that is the District Avenue roundabout, and the Hillsdale Avenue extension, and then the Rivanna River bike ped crossing over on the east side of town. So we will have to down select to probably 4 projects, and it's possible that some of those projects, like Avon Street, might need to be broken down into 2 or even more in order to get to fundable size. So the city's position was that we should prioritize the ones in the south side of town, as those are dangerous corridors. We saw a lot of fatalities on Fifth Street, and we've done a lot of work up at Hydraulic lately, and of course we got funded for that last year. So in addition to that, we got a presentation from UVA Research Center working on analyzing data on bicycle crashes across Virginia. A really interesting presentation. I recommend they give it to other groups, including the policy board, and I hope they do. You can check out a live tweet that I did of it on my Twitter page. Super interesting data. That's what I got. Thanks.
Ms. Dow is not on, I don't think, so we'll go to Mr. Zoliates.
A couple of interesting meetings to talk about. The Housing Advisory Committee met on 5/19, can't remember what month that was, and discussed tax policy. Good stuff. It was initiated by Jason Vandiver, the city treasurer. We have been doing tax credits for new construction on historic homes at a tax abatement program. And we've been doing it like, I think 20 years. Very few people take it up, but those few really get the money out of it. And we're talking about generally high income people and very high dollar homes. So sort of like an affordable home to a mansion, which was not the intent of the program. The intent of the program was to save historic homes that would otherwise be lost entirely. So he brought it to us, basically saying, okay, what? And there are exceptions, but in terms of dollar value, I've received a helpful correction from a fellow commissioner. But in terms of dollar value, most of it goes to a small number of very wealthy people. And we got actually wonderful data on that I can share. Really impressive. So the conversation was, okay, well, what do we do with this? How do we rejigger this to really serve the public and use our dollars most effectively? And there was some consensus that we definitely do want to focus on preservation as well as affordability, affordable home ownership, affordable rentals, and really help to deliver the goals of this draft comprehensive plan, which was exciting. Speaking of the comprehensive plan, Seville Plans Together Steering Committee met on 5/19, the same day. Oh, what a day it was. Oh, what a day. We talked about many things. Actually, a lot of this material, again, was familiar to us. I think most notable, a lot of discussion about medium intensity residential. The neighborhood leaders group representative had a lot of sort of constructive feedback about that, and some concerns that she had heard, which I think you've probably heard as well. So I think a productive meeting. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Lindra.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. I have a couple of committee meetings to report on. The Board of Architectural Review met May 18th. I was not able to attend because of a conflict, but the notes from that meeting indicate that the consent agenda had 2 certificate of appropriatenesses that were approved. And during the regular agenda, there was only 1 COA application. This is for a new apartment building, 3 stories with underground parking that is at 601 Preston Place, which is behind the Preston Court Apartments. After discussion by the board, the applicant deferred the application, and so I expect we'll be seeing that again. The Tree Commission met just last week, June 1st. We had a really interesting presentation by a state forestry official who told us about a proposal to the Parks and Rec, City Parks and Rec, to do a biological control release and study experiment at Ragged Mountain Nature Area. This is an experiment that will test the ability of selected parasites to control the emerald ash borer. It's going to be a 5-year study and will be completely funded by the USDA. And this is a study that's actually been ongoing since 2007 and is now has been started in over 29 states already. The Tree Commission did endorse the study, and it now goes to, or it is in Parks and Rec for approval, I believe. The Nature Conservancy has given a $20,000 grant for a partnership of local nonprofits to plant trees in a low canopy city neighborhood. The Tree Commission is supporting the effort and will participate. And a plan is now being developed to select the neighborhood, find additional sponsors, and implement the planning that is going to happen. It's a wonderful public-private partnership example. Finally, an RFP is being written now to perform a study of the mall trees. And we discussed the importance of how this study needs to dovetail with the planned cultural landscape report that is also going to be advertised soon by the city for the same mall, downtown mall. Thank you.
And very briefly, Parks and Rec, they've been very, very busy. And the focus has just been on getting things open again. And the opening is based on what the CDC advises and what state and local officials allow us to do. The good news is we're allowed to open a lot of things. The bad news is we don't have the people to help us open them. So there's a paucity of folks to help us manage things. And so the gating factor to doing a lot of the things that we need to do relates to our ability to get people on board. So we've got lots of openings. If you're interested, go to the Parks and Rec website and apply. We'd love to have you. I want to cut things short on my end because I want to toss the ball to the NDS folks to talk a little bit about where we are on the comprehensive plan process. We have all gotten multiple hundreds of emails regarding this, and there's lots of confusion relating to the process. And they're going to tend to lend a little clarity to that. So, Missy, Alex, either one of you guys want to take the ball?
Sure, Alex is going to start the conversation, and then I'll pick up at the end.
Good evening, commissioners. It's good to see you again. Yeah, there has been a lot of feedback we can't complain that we are not getting any feedback on the comprehensive plan because everybody is well aware that we're getting a lot of feedback from the community. At this point, we have a draft of the chapters within the comprehensive plan and also a draft future land use plan. And those have been made public to solicit public comment. And that we are getting the commissioners, the city council, the website, a centralized location for feedback and staff. So we're getting a lot of comments from the public. In terms of the process going forward, the comment period has been extended from May 31st to June 13th. And we are still receiving comments. And then probably after June 13th, people will continue to probably send us comments. And at this time, the consultant is working with staff to summarize the comment by categories. And those will be reviewed by the Planning Commission on June 29th. Having said that, on the same June 29th, the Planning Commission work session will include a discussion of the comments, and staff and the consultant will also hear back from the Planning Commission in terms of your own comments, and then where we go at that point. I'm sure the Planning Commission and the public would like to know after June 29th, then what? That June 29th, we enable staff and the consultant, to prepare informed timeline on how the final draft document makes its way to the Planning Commission and the City Council for joint public hearing, and subsequently to the City Council for final consideration. So there will be a lot of discussion at June 29th meeting. And after that, the next steps in terms of final review process, the Planning Commission action, and the consideration by the City Council will be determined. And that timeline will be communicated to the Planning Commission accordingly. So that's where we are, and then that's where we are heading, from this point to June 29.
May I ask you a question?
Yes,
The
please.
meeting on June 29th, that focuses only on the future land use map. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we can still discuss the draft chapters, but at this point, it looks like everything is centered on the draft future land use map. So that will probably drive the discussion.
There seems to be a little confusion, and maybe you can help us and help the public. What is the difference between the future land use map and the rezoning process?
The future land use map, it's like a vision, of the future land use, how the development scenario will pan out in the future. The zoning is actually a legal document. It essentially dictates how development occurs and under what conditions. So it's the zoning ordinance that will actually detail, what we do and how we are going to do it. So there is a lot of legal consideration going into the zoning ordinance as opposed to the future land use map.
So an actual endorsement of the vision, which is the future land use map, does not necessarily dictate what the rezoning will look like.
Yeah, the rezoning. While the rezoning we look at that and the comprehensive plan, it's a more detailed legal provisions.
Okay.
And
so a lot of the feedback we've gotten is, do we have the infrastructure in place to support the increased density that we may be considering? At what point do we work with the traffic engineers, the city engineers, the utilities department, the public works department, to figure out whether the infrastructure that we've got in place will support the new zoning that will come later?
Yeah, we'll touch base with the public works and other infrastructure related department. However, I think the public needs to know the comprehensive plan has about 7 chapters. And some of the chapters deal with community facilities and infrastructure like transportation, community facility, and what have you. You know, and if there will be problem, you know, in terms of infrastructure support, you know, the public works department and the appropriate other appropriate city departments that are vested with the authority of providing an infrastructure support for development, you know, they will point that out. That's the reason why you have various elements within this comprehensive plan. You have the land use, you have the demographic information, then you have the infrastructure, you know, aspect that will say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think we have enough infrastructure, you know, to support this development. So we can touch base with public works, public utilities to clarify certain things.
Before I toss the ball to Missy, are there any other questions from the dais for Alex?
So I just want to be clear. So when you say there's going to be a timeline laid out on June 29th or after June 29th to get to the final draft, that doesn't mean that there's one more iteration. That just means that we'll have kind of like a timeline, I guess, for how many more iterations there will be before we get to that final.
You're talking about in terms of engagement with the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the engagement with the Planning Commission is ongoing, you know, because at the end of the day, the Planning Commission is the, I don't know how to put it, is the lead entity in terms of comprehensive planning, land use decisions, transportation, and what have you. So the engagement with the Planning Commission doesn't end on 29th. When it's necessary, we touch base with the Planning Commission during the meetings, or if we find it absolutely necessary, then we can schedule a meeting just to brief you, you know, but June 29th meeting. After that, we'll be looking at the next major steps and then what we need to do to get to that point, which is the joint public hearing.
Okay, great. So should we expect after that meeting to start to see maybe like an increased tempo of work sessions on the topic before, like as we prepare to get to that final state?
Yeah, I think that is something we have to discuss, you know, with the consultant, you know, because they have their own timeline, they adjust things, you know. I think after June 29th, we have to discuss that. Already we've started engagement in terms of that particular timeline with them already, you know, because right now we are meeting with them every week, you know, staff and the consultant, we have check-ins every week. So we started a preliminary discussion in terms of after June 29th, you know, how do we move forward, you know, to the next phase.
And you may have mentioned this, and if I have missed it, forgive me. But the next objective is to complete and get a nod on the land use, the future land use map. And then we segue into the balance of the documents. And what point are you going to be asking for a nod on the land use map?
That's, you know, from the Planning Commission.
Yes.
We haven't decided that yet, you know, because when we meet on June 29th, and after the discussion, we will provide some kind of an idea what needs to get done before we get to the planning commission. And once we get a hold of that, then we'll be able to provide an educated feedback or guess to the planning commission in terms of, okay, folks, here is when you guys expect us to come back to you with this and this and that.
So just to reiterate, just for the public, this is a vision document. The future land use map is a vision document. We are ways away from rezoning. We're ways away from things like R1 going away. R1 is not, based on this vision document, isn't going away. So again, vision document versus an ordinance. An ordinance is where things become real and become concrete. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I have a quick staffing question. Any luck on a new housing coordinator for the position?
Good question. You know, actually, I went over to the city manager's office today to ask that question, but the city manager wasn't there, so I spoke with Brenda Kelly. You know, we talked about that. So there is a discussion right now in terms of when, you know, this will be advertised. There are some issues that are currently being considered related to that, you know, so once that is taken care of, it will be re-advertised.
Right. Anyone else? Ms. Creasy.
Sure, I'm not going to reiterate things that Alex noted, except that I may do one or two that may be in different wording, which might, you know, just spark somebody's interest in a different way. We've definitely appreciated all of the comments that we've been receiving from the community. A lot of interest, a lot of passion from the community in very different ways. We have been working with the consultants to, you know, they are right now getting that categorized and getting it organized in such a way that the commission is going to be able to look at that and be able to circulate through and figure out areas that need additional discussion as we move forward. There was a lot of confusion based on the comments about a number of things, and it'll take us all a while probably to communicate that, because some of these concepts, unless you do this every day, are not something that you would know about, or you would see a map. Anytime somebody sees a map, they think it's happening right away. And so that's one of the things with the future land use map that can be kind of complicated, because it's a visioning document that helps as you're getting into the things that become code and become the area and the things that you want to become as a community into the future. But once you start seeing colors on paper and colors on top of, you know, things that you like and places that you go, it can be a little bit disjointing in a way. But like, you know, both Hosea has said and Alex has said, that, you know, the future land use map is a visioning tool. It's not legally binding like the zoning ordinance is, and the zoning ordinance is the step that comes after the land use map. So we, as part of this project, we have professional consultants on board to assist us with recommendations on things that might work for our community to implement the goals that our community wants to bring forward. The commission has been working on this for an awful long time, and there's been a lot of community members involved as well. This effort started in 2016, 2017 timeframe. And one of the major principles that started from this was that the Charlottesville community is growing. And with that growth, the Planning Commission did not want that just to happen without there being a way to be involved in how that growth occurs and where that growth comes. So the commission really came at this from something is going to happen to our community. We know that we're seeing growth, and we want to consciously make decisions about how that happens and not allow something to happen to us. So I think that's one thing that we don't want to get lost in the discussion here. I know a number of folks who've commented have provided feedback on some of the population projections that have that are out there, and they show some numbers. We see a lot of applications that come through the community. We see a lot of increased infrastructure and industry that are moving forward to our community. We also see a number of people who are having to leave our community because they can't find a place to be in our community. So there are a lot of different factors that come into play with that. And so, you know, the main thing we want folks to be able to recognize here is we know that this is coming, and we want to be able to look at this we want the community to have a voice in how that comes to our community. A lot of interest in the comprehensive plan. We've had a lot of comments. Some of the bigger things that the future land use map presented at this point in time shows is, you know, an increase in the number of units in general residential areas. It introduces a medium density residential category. It provides for some neighborhood nodes. And these are things that are different. And people in our community have different feelings and different thoughts about how these things that are not the same may or may not affect them. And, you know, the commission very much recognizes that this is a factor for all in the community. And, you know, it's one of those things is the telephone game that we all remember from back in the day, where you hear a message and it goes around to different people, and by the time it gets down the line, the message kind of changes. And, you know, we're seeing a little bit of this with the discussion, and so we want to do the best we can to help get people as clear as possible on what's going on with this process. And we know we have some work to do on that. Just want to encourage the public that we've got this opportunity on June 29th. Well, first of all, the public comment period is still open, and we are taking any and all comments. Comments are coming in all different ways. They're coming in by email, they're coming in by phone calls, they're coming in by the Planning Commission listserv on our website. And all of those that come in are getting routed to the commissioners as well as to the consultants on the project. The volume is incredibly high. And so at this point, we don't have the capacity to do individual answers at this point. So I do want to let you know that we are seeing that, and we are getting those combined, and there will be the opportunity to see that your comment is part of the discussion. So I do apologize that we're not providing comments on the spot, but the volume, you know, thank you for being so involved, it is very high. And so we can't do it individually, but we're hopeful that once we get them combined, we'll be able to help with that. Do want to note that we have the work session on June 29th. Everyone is welcome to view that opportunity. It's going to be at 5:30. We'll have it on Zoom. We'll have the links available for folks in advance of that. A week in advance of that meeting, we'll have all the materials that are available. So folks will have the opportunity to review those, and folks may have some comments concerning that too. I'm going to stop there just because I've talked quite a bit, and allow for whether, Chair, we want to have more questions from the commission, or we're bumping up on 6 o'clock. Either way, we can do whatever we need to do.
Then this is important. So let's just take another couple of minutes because we do. The problem is we're going to lose Reed, and we need Reed to get into the other discussion. So let's go with Jody because I think Jody, Mr. Lindra has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I want to repeat and emphasize something that Ms. Creasy pointed out. This process of creating a new comprehensive plan started over 5 years ago. And for over 4 years, the Planning Commission has been pleading, begging for public comment to come in to help with this process. And that has taken the form of over 30 some meetings, presentations, workshops throughout the community. And so it has been, and it was the Planning Commission's point of view. It was their objective from the very beginning that they wanted to hear from the public. They wanted to hear what people had to say about the comprehensive plan and about what's going to happen to our city as a result of the continuing growth. So this has been going on for quite some time, and I just want to emphasize that because we've seen a number of comments where people are surprised. They feel like it's just been brought to them for the first time within the last few weeks, and that is just not the case. Thank you, Chair.
All right, very briefly, anyone else? Because we really do need to get Reed on board, up and out. Okay. Right, then let's do the consent agenda and then we'll move on. And then I'll have a conversation with Missy and Joe about when we're going to do this. So the consent agenda contains the minutes from February 9th. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a move and a second, motion and a second, all in favor? Any objections? Any abstentions? Minutes are approved. Ms. Creasy, Mr. Rice, what I'd like to do, because we need Reed's input, is move matters to be presented by the public, not on the formal agenda, to after the agenda item, which relates to short-term rentals. Ms. Creasy, are we able to do that?
I believe so. We may have some speakers that are interested in this topic. And there would be the opportunity for them to share their comments, and then maybe following matters from the public, if something were to come up that you all wanted to speak further on, that may be an opportunity.
So why don't we, does this work? Why don't I toss the ball to Ms. Russell, and then she will toss the ball to Reed. And then before we begin deliberating, we'll give the public a chance to chat with us about short-term rentals. Does that work?
That sounds like a great plan.
Ms. Russell, you're running the meeting.
Sure, thank you. Thanks to everyone. I know this has been, the discussion around short-term rentals and homestay has been recently, well, fairly recently discussed in the past few years. And obviously I'm new to the commission. So broadly, I want to frame the question or the topic is sort of, are our short-term and / homestay regulations serving our community as best they can? I'll start with a couple of data points, and this is a study that's specific to Airbnb, but just understand that when we're talking about Airbnb, I'm talking about short-term rentals and homestay broadly. So evidence, and this is a report from the Economic Policy Institute. Evidence suggests that the presence of Airbnb raises local housing costs. Property owners do not benefit from Airbnb capacity to lower the transaction costs of operating short-term rentals, but the beneficiaries are disproportionately white and high wealth households. The shift from traditional hotels to Airbnb lodging leads to less reliable tax payments to cities. And city residents likely suffer when Airbnb or Airbnb operators circumvent zoning laws that ban lodging businesses from residential neighborhoods, or violate our policies around short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. So in that, the first problem I'm presenting to address is do our short-term rentals and homestay regulations go far enough? Whom do they benefit? And at what cost to our neighborhoods and affordable housing picture? And then if they do, and they are, we can discuss whether they are, whether the intent is acceptable. Can they be enforced adequately given, our city staff resources to, again, serve our community? Second kind of topic of conversation is data from Forbes, and it talks about the Airbnb effect, and that is essentially a remarkably similar. The Airbnb effect is similar to gentrification in that it slowly increases the value of an area to the detriment of the indigenous or local residents, many of whom are pushed out due to financial constraints. So my question around that data point is, in the future, will, looking ahead towards additional possible increases in density, ADUs, will that proposed soft density result in more rentable housing stock, which I believe is the intent behind that recommendation, or will it result in more short-term rentals used in more of an Airbnb type capacity? How would we prevent this from happening? I don't think that's what we would want. So my anticipated outcome resulting from this discussion is not to introduce, a new zoning or homestay regulation per se, but I want to know if our current homestay and short-term rental policies are sound, that staff are able to enforce them. And then I'd like to understand that we wouldn't potentially see more of the cons of Airbnb or short-term rentals in the future if our zoning allows for more ADUs and soft density.
And Reed, I think you got the floor now.
Okay, everyone hear me okay? Because my computer sometimes is wonky. We good?
Yep.
All right, so thank you first of all for changing up the meeting so I can get out of here at 7. That being said, my colleague Craig Fabio is on the call and is also knowledgeable about the subject. You also have Todd Divers, who works on the taxation side of this use. I was going to go ahead and just kind of summarize the staff report. I'm just basically providing facts. I'm trying to keep my opinions separate from the content of the meeting. So I'll just go ahead and then you have, if you have any questions, let me know. So I'm glad we can revisit this. It's been 5 years or so, and I think it's a good time to come back and see what problems or successes might exist from the homestay ordinance. Just real quickly for any people in the public, the Virginia Code defines a short-term rental as providing space intended for occupancy or lodging purposes for a period of fewer than 30 consecutive days in exchange for a charge for that occupancy. So we are here because this planning commission wanted us to review the ordinance, which city council enacted a resolution to the planning commission in 2015 to study it, and we rolled out an ordinance. It was adopted at September 8th, 2015, which took a long time. There's a lot of collaboration with business owners and people who had already been doing short-term rental in the city. So it was a very detailed process. So right now, the city authorizes short-term rental in 2 ways: through the homestay program, which really is only for residential zones where a homeowner resides in the property. Those are the only people who apply for homestays or homestay permits. Right now, I've gotten say about 125 that I've signed off on, which is more than last year and years prior. And then also a hotel or other districts that allow hotel as a by right use can also have short-term rentals. So apartment buildings can offer short-term rentals as long as it's a by right use for a hotel. So prior to this ordinance, there was the ability to have short-term rentals. Primarily, we did have a homestay where we allowed people to rent up to 3 guest rooms in their house, but they had to be on premises when those rooms were let out. And then we also, and that was in the single family, 2-family zoning districts. And then we also had bed and breakfast, which allowed 8 guest rooms, and then inn, which allowed up to 15 guest rooms. And those were more in the higher density residential units, residential zoning districts through the special use process. And those 2, bed and breakfast and inn, are still in our zoning code. But traditionally, going way back, I mean, we've allowed boarding houses for many years. I mean, that was a major use, and there are still a couple boarding houses in the city. So let's see here, I'm sorry. So when staff initially looked at the homestay regulations, we discussed different things. For instance, whether or not we should have a lottery to cap the certain like number of homestays, but we figured that would have holes in it, and that was not pursued as an option. Also, it was assumed that at some point there would be a saturation point, and once there was 100, let's say, there would be no more need for homestays, and so they would kind of self-regulate. But I am not seeing that. I am not seeing any sort of top of that bubble. I mean, the bubble just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's amazing to me how many more homestays there are than I would ever imagine. So when we did create the ordinance, though, we focused on 3 main things: safety, impact, and enforcement. So safety, we have something in our ordinance that says that you have to have a fire detector and a carbon monoxide detector. And it also states that staff can come into the property at least 1 time each year to inspect these. I do not go in and inspect those uses, but that clause is in the ordinance. Impact, how is it going to affect the neighborhood, and who can apply for these? For instance, the code says you have to be a property owner and reside in the home for at least 180 days of each calendar year, which is not half a year. And it's weird why that's in there. Maybe it'd be at least 183 days of each calendar year. But certainly lots of things can impact a property and also a neighborhood. It allows up to 6 adults with any number of children to occupy a home as a short-term rental. But so, is it the number of people doesn't really affect an impact on the neighborhood. It's the number of cars, the amount of noise they produce, and the amount of trash and impact. That's really what you see. So for instance, are those 6 individuals arriving in separate vehicles? Is there enough parking on the street? Is it already overcrowded? Is there parking on the property? Will the guests stay out late at night? Is there a hot tub on the property? Is it a dense neighborhood, or is there a lot of open space? So there's just a lot of different factors. And as we know in the city, there's a lot of different environments. So the program impacts some neighborhoods a little more intensely than other neighborhoods. And then finally, enforcement. In the beginning, I got about maybe 2 or 3 complaints a year, and now I'm getting many more complaints. And it really is about impact, noise, and vehicles, but also from other homestay operators who are doing running their homestay legally, abiding by the law, and looking across town and saying, no fair, why is that person not abiding by the law? So we're getting a lot more complaints. We do have something written in the code that if we get more than 3 substantiated complaints, that we can revoke a permit, and for the remainder of that year and the subsequent year. But if someone hasn't gotten a homestay permit and is operating illegally because they don't reside in the property, then that doesn't come into play, and we enforce the ordinance instead through the notice of violation process. As far as the getting a permit, it's a annual permit, the $100 fee. I have heard some rumbles that is expensive, and my opinion is that it's just, they're operating a business in their home, and so they should have to pay a fee, and really $100 versus the amount that they make is very minimal. And this is an annual permit, and so it is a little, as a staff of 2 people, it takes a while to send out all the permits and kind of babysit and make sure everyone's getting their permit. So really, each year, not everyone gets a permit, even though they're operating their homestay in compliance. So you've got 3 tiers. You got the people who are getting the permit and they're following all the rules. You're getting other people who, for whatever reason, aren't renewing their permits, but they're still going to comply. And then the 3rd category, which is, in my opinion, the smallest category, because I've done a lot of research and I get a lot of complaints, is the people who either rent to more than 8 adults, or they don't reside in the property. And the people I'm really most concerned about are the people that are breaking the law and they don't reside there, and those are the people that I'm going after. So finally, I just want to let you know that what other localities are doing. Our ordinance just 5 years ago, I guess 6 years ago, was like one of the first in the state. So a lot of other localities in Virginia were kind of just on autopilot, watching what other people wanted to do, because they didn't want to take drastic steps too quickly. So Blacksburg just rolled out an ordinance that kind of mirrors ours, but is more restrictive, which says that a property owner can rent rooms for a maximum of 90 days each year, and they can rent out the entire property for just 30 days of each year. On the other side, the city of Alexandria doesn't have any limitation. There's no limitation at all, except that you have to register with the Department of Finance. So there's no permit whatsoever. But that's just kind of, Blacksburg is similar to Charlottesville because of the universities and the impact from the student population. Alexandria is a lot more urban, so I can see how those are different. So if you have more questions, please let me know. And even though I'm going to jump off at 7, I'm going to watch the tape, and feel free to email me if you have any questions. So there you go.
I'm so sorry, but before we jump in, we've been getting some comments from those who are watching, wondering if we're going to have a matters from the public opportunity later in the meeting. And I just wanted to convey that, yes, we're moving things around a little bit, but we're going to have the opportunity for.
There'll be 2 opportunities.
Correct.
One to talk about this, and then one to talk about other things later. So. Right. One quick question. You don't, in your report, does not recommend a lot of amendments to the ordinance. The 183-day piece is the only thing that leaps out at me. What would you like to see amended? And what would make this ordinance better?
Well, so the enforcement of the ordinance isn't really, I think the code is pretty sound. It's manpower, to be honest. There's two of us, and not to put upper management, because upper management has changed so many times, but we've been asking for a zoning administrator for over 12 years. I'm sorry, a zoning inspector for over 12 years. And it just, for whatever reason, can't find its way into the budget. So with the staff time that we have and all our other duties and responsibilities, we have to prioritize our time. And so we really focus more on complaints that we get, and we're not proactively going out and enforcing these things. This ordinance has turned out to be, with all the other ordinances that we've gone through, I mean, this by far takes up way more time than I would ever imagine. You would think that you would create this tool where everyone has this opportunity to make money off their property. And in turn, or instead, there's a lot of people that just see this as an investment. And that's what they want to do. I didn't predict that way back when, because that just wasn't the business model 6 years ago. But really the emphasis on making this only permitted for owner occupied properties is because the planning commissioners prior to you didn't want Charlottesville to turn into the Outer Banks, where it just turns into a bunch of rental units and it drives out a bunch of people. So there are some, I mean, most of the people are doing it responsibly. I mean, by far, and the same people apply every single year. And I, have when I type in their email, it pops up because I've corresponded with them. And that's most of the people. It's only, I can't put a number on it because I'm sure there's some I don't know about, but it's very small comparatively. At least the ones that I can get complaints about. I mean, it's really not so much the owner not being owner occupied, it's the renting out to more than 6 people, which is, sometimes hard to figure out, but there's ways to do it.
Ms. Russell, are we ready to open this up to public comment, or how do you want to do that?
Well, I just want to point out that Todd Divers has his hand raised. Maybe he would like to
Cool.
weigh in.
You're muted, Todd.
Thanks, Reed. Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Thanks for including me on this. I mean, I've got some ideas. I know you asked Reed. I don't think you can, in good conscience, make the ordinance any more restrictive than it is without giving Reed some help.
Mhm.
I mean, that would just be negligent in my opinion. I'll be honest with you. We've got about 250 of these things in our tax system. Reed's got about 125 in the homestay system. So, I mean, he's not hearing about a lot of them because they're not misbehaving, but that doesn't mean that they're doing what they're supposed to do. I think I'm just going to touch on one other thing and I'll let you guys get back to it. But I think the annual $100 fee is onerous. I think that is the only home occupation permit that requires a fee every single year. Every other home occupation permit is a one-time thing. I think it's a disincentive for compliance. I think it ties Reed and Craig up, chasing people for $100 when they, could be going out doing something else. He's not going to tell you that because, he's a nice guy. But I think if you did anything, I would get rid of that. I wouldn't make people pay that $100 every single year, and I'd get them some help. That's it.
hey, Ms. Russell, do you want to open it up to public comment?
Absolutely.
All right, so what we're going to do is open it up for public comment. In this section, we're only talking about the short-term rentals. We will open it up for general stuff after we wrap up the discussion on short-term rentals. So, Mr. Rice, Is there anyone in the lobby that would like to talk about short-term rentals?
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. At this time, if you'd like to address the Planning Commission on short-term rentals, click your raise hand icon, or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. We will call on you in the order of hands raised, and you will have 3 minutes for comment. And our first commenter is Miranda Watson. Miranda, you're on with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Welcome.
Hello. So I wanted to be here today because I have a small business where I manage short-term rentals in town for homeowners when they're away. So I just kind of wanted to share my perspective on that and kind of, I mean, from my perspective, the very positive impact that I've seen this have for local homeowners. So, I mean, on a more serious level, I mean, we know this is a difficult town for a lot of people to afford to live in. And so protecting, people's ability to kind of utilize their homes in this way when they're away. I mean, I've seen people be able to separate from their spouses because, or be able to afford to do that. I've seen people be able to stay in their homes when they wouldn't have been able to otherwise, to like pay for graduate school. And then, on the lighter side, pay for like a family vacation and that kind of stuff. So, as far as my perspective is concerned, where it's being done well, it's being managed where, this is what I'm doing now. I'm available 24/7 to kind of deal with anything that could arise. I can kind of advise people on being able to follow the rules and the protocols that have sort of been laid out for the city. I've just seen it be a hugely beneficial thing for a lot of people in town. And from my angle, I'm also able to employ a number of cleaners. Local individuals to help do that. I went to the IRC and kind of trained like refugee women who had come in as like, this is a well-paid job that I can sort of train them. They could bring their kids. They don't have to speak a lot of English. And also just kind of steer all of the guests that are coming to town to, my favorite local restaurants and shops. And, I'm trying to kind of take what's coming in, which is already coming in, which is people with money to spend in Charlottesville, and kind of figure out how I can sort of distribute that amongst the community as best I can, and to the homeowners themselves, as opposed to it going to kind of a hotel. So, just from my perspective, it's been an awesome thing. And I mean, for me, of course, personally, I quit my other job and this is what I do now. So, it's benefited me as well. So I saw kind of just in the comments, like the ability to protect the whole house rental, I think is important, which is the part where the owner doesn't have to be there, because that's sort of the main interest point for people who are coming to Charlottesville. So I think that is important to protect.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miranda.
And next we have Laura Santiago. Laura, you're on with the Planning Commission. You will have 3 minutes.
Welcome, Laura.
Hi, I want to thank you guys for your time. I know working for public service is often a thankless job, and I appreciate all you guys with complete sincerity. I was wondering, Ms. Russell, if you could throw up those 2 resources you mentioned in your chat. This is a subject I've been following for many years, since we lived briefly in a country where the majority of their travel is short-term rentals, not the hotel industry, which is a major lobbying factor in this. And when I got back, I just started following this obsessively. And my understanding was the research that you cited was mostly done in cities where investors were building up, kind of buying up big apartment complexes. And I really look forward to reading that and seeing if that has changed or my understanding is incorrect. Furthermore, it sounds like, Reed has a really, really good grasp on this. Happy to, as a short-term rental owner, very happy to pay a significant down payment one-time fee, use that for the city to enforce the regulations. It's written very solidly compared to other places in this country, as you guys said earlier, already. So what we just need to do is focus on, I don't see the speaker now. She actually spoke over half an hour ago, but she mentioned the 2 different types of rentals. An investor who's buying a property they have never lived in, do not plan to live in, and takes from longer term rentals versus, you know, the retired couple who's renting their basement, or the teachers, as the first short-term rental owners I knew in Charlottesville were teachers who would rent their house when they would go away for the summer. Obviously a group that needs affordable housing. So I think you guys are already on there. Just enforce what we got. Make the short-term rental owners pay to enforce it. We're happy to. You guys are providing us the service. So thanks for all you do. Happy if you guys want to reach out in the future. My name is Laura Santiago again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura.
And next up, we have Peter Crossan. Peter, you're on with the Planning Commission. You'll have 3 minutes.
Welcome, Peter. And Peter, you're on. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Joe, why don't we come back?
Can you hear me now?
Peter? Yeah, yes, yes.
There he is.
we can.
All right. Again, I would like to reiterate what the last speaker just said, and thank you all for what you're doing. I was fully aware of the homestay ordinance in Charlottesville more than 5 years ago before I purchased my house here, and intentionally purchased a duplex with the intent of operating the homestay to supplement my income. Not so much for my income now. I'm still working, but I'm approaching retirement age. And when I do retire, part of my retirement plan is the income that I can earn off of this property. That being said, the $100 annual fee, I don't consider it punitive or a disincentive. It's just part of doing business in the city, and I'm fine with it. I was fine with signing the waiver to have the property inspected. I did a significant renovation in the space that I use as my short stay space so that it would be compliant with fire code. It's very, very diligent, making sure that the place would be safe and a good spot for my guests to stay. But this business is a hospitality business. And like it or not, Charlottesville is a big hospitality town. We do a lot of business here. I'd say I've been in operation for over 3 years. Last year was a very big exception to the norm, but in the other years, this year too, I'm doing about roughly 20% of my business involves wedding related stuff. I'm very close to the university. Football season is big for me. If I were unable to continue doing business, I would convert the place into an apartment that would be rented to university students. And it's not going to have a big impact on affordable housing because of the neighborhood that I'm in. I'm a block from a fire station, a block in either direction from a gas station, a block from half a dozen restaurants. It's a very good location for this operation. I can understand people being upset about having something in their residential neighborhood, but my neighborhood is very mixed use. And I would like, if you're going to make modifications to zoning regarding short stay, that you consider the mixture of use in a neighborhood, residential versus commercial / residential. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Peter.
I would also like to point out that about 2 years ago,
You got about 5 seconds.
Delegate Peace, who's from the eastern part of the state, submitted to the state legislature an ordinance that was largely based on the city of Charlottesville's homestay ordinance for consideration as state law so that it would be universal across all of Virginia. That didn't go anywhere in the legislature, but your ordinance is so well structured that it was at least considered for introduction for, statewide law.
All right, thank you very much, Peter. Mr. Rice.
Next up, we have Sean Lyons. Sean, you're on with the commission. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, Sean.
Good afternoon. I really appreciate this conversation about this important issue. I am a Charlottesville STR owner, operator, and I have been so for approximately 3 years. I would like, as an STR owner, to be respectful of my neighbors. I do not want to inconvenience them with my guests. I do not want them to have less of a quality of life because I'm operating my short-term rental. What I have seen in my neighborhood over the last few years is the introduction of new STRs which are not in compliance. They exceed the maximum number of guests. They occasionally cause disturbances to our neighbors. So in listening to Mr. Broadhead mention that he is aware of owners who are not compliant, I'm glad that he acknowledges that. I think it is very important that the owner operator be in the residence, be there to monitor, be there to respond to the concerns of neighbors in the area. That is not always the case. As you may be aware, there are many devices that allow owners to monitor the activity of their guests, the noise level, surveillance cameras. I'm adjacent to one that has all of those features, but there's still a blindness that comes with owners who aren't there. Just think of it. You're awakened at 2 o'clock in the morning. How do you contact the owner? Some of the owners are unknown. They don't provide any information on how you make them aware of concerns. They're not obligated to. So in going back to the fact that the ordinance requires the owner operator to be in residence, I hope in the future that this can actually be enforced in a consistent and fair manner. And I believe that that will increase the quality of the experience and minimize the disruption that non-owner operators experience while living adjacent to these short-term rentals. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Sean.
And next up, we have Scott Wiley. Scott, you're on with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Welcome, Scott.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I would add, I actually talked and was sort of instrumental or I should say involved in the original regulations. So a couple of points that I made then, I'll just briefly make now. Number one, over that period, I mean, my family has contributed several $1,000s in taxes to Charlottesville based on the 8% we pay in income. I do think that the main problem is people who buy places and rent them out when they're not there all the time. So the people like me who live here and occasionally go away for a weekend, and I mentioned this before, so I'm a nurse and there are 10 nurses in my unit. I'm the only one who can afford to live in Charlottesville. Everybody else lives in Fluvanna, Nelson, Greene, Buckingham, and so forth, and drives into work because they can't afford to live in Charlottesville. So this property we have 2 bedrooms that we rent out, and it helps us to be able to afford to live in Charlottesville. I hope that you will not throw the good out with the bad. I think that there are, the fact that there are people who aren't following regulations doesn't mean that those of us who are and contribute to the tax base and are responsible, hopefully that won't get thrown out with the people who buy up several properties and do affect property values. And as far as that goes, in my neighborhood in Rose Hill, the thing that affects affordability is the fact that there are houses getting torn down and $450,000 houses being put up next door. And then the last thing is I just would reiterate what other people have said. we're pretty close to Preston Avenue with all of the developments along there in terms of restaurants and pubs and so forth. And people who stay here can walk to those, and they contribute to the tax base. So those are the people that, like it or not, taxes and income are what drive a lot of ability to do things in the city. So I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
And next up, we have Craig Griffin. Craig, you're on with the Planning Commission. You'll have 3 minutes.
Welcome, Craig.
Hello, I moved to Charlottesville in 1991, actually. Seen a lot of change over the years. I've been a short-term stay host now for about 4 or 5 years in our current location. And I can echo a lot of the things that you've been hearing this evening, is that that folks who are coming to stay in Charlottesville are coming because of the experience that the Charlottesville people provide. And so we spend a lot of our time in our interactions with our clients recommending restaurants like Marie Bet, like Angelique's in the Dairy Market, which is fantastic fried chicken if you've ever been there. We tell people to explore the neighborhood, to go to Cardinal, to go to the neighborhood shops and that kind of thing. And that actually has a significant economic impact. That folks who are coming here really do want to learn about what Charlottesville is all about. And by providing those opportunities to stay close into those things that are uniquely Charlottesville, I think is really important. If you require that an owner stays in the house with the guests, that breaks down that whole paradigm. And the reason for that is not because they can go wild. It's just that they want to unpack and be able to settle in and do their thing and have their conversations and that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with having rules around size of groups or about making sure that we're following the rules and paying the fees and that kind of thing. But it's really important that folks can settle into a home, unpack their things, and not be sort of have an odd roommate in the whole equation. The last thing I would say is that it's also really valuable to understand that when people come to Charlottesville, they're coming here for an event of some kind. They're coming to go on vacation. They're coming for graduation. They're coming for any variety of events, a wedding, that kind of thing. And it's really important that they have a place where they can gather and be together during that time. Thank you.
If anybody else would like to comment on short-term rentals, click the raise hand icon or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. We will have a chance later in the meeting for general comment. Chair, I see no hands raised.
All right, we will close the comment session for this part of the meeting. Ms. Russell, I'll let you kick it off and let you tell us where you want to go.
I think it would be good to hear what others on the commission think. I mean, I have some commentary, and I want to be clear. Like, I think that we actually do have good regulations. And I'm concerned about the ability to enforce, but want to maybe revisit that and hear what others think. That's okay.
Right, then we'll go from left to right. So, Mr. Palmer.
I don't think I have any comments to add. Thanks, though.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to that question of enforcement, I've kind of heard this, I don't know if you call it a rumor or idea or whatever, from time to time, that like the owner occupancy requirement does not apply to LLCs because they aren't people and therefore don't, have the ability to reside at a place. And, to that point, I know there are some companies in town that run many Airbnbs, and many people seem to think that they are all full-time Airbnbs where no one resides at that place. So I guess the question is, like, is that true, or do you, no matter what, have to reside at a place? And are all of, if there are these companies that are running many full-time Airbnbs, are they all in violation?
Lisa, you're going to chime in on the
I
LLC
think I
part?
will. I think I
Okay.
will. No, I don't think it can be said that that's a hard and fast rule. As a general rule, an LLC is a type of business entity. So if you go to find out what state laws apply to how an LLC is set up and how they're supposed to be operated, it's in a section of the state code called corporations. So it's a business type entity. But that being said, a number of LLCs only have one member, and they conduct business activities through that corporation, and they get some protection from liability. But in terms of how the IRS regards it, it's an extension of that individual's income. So a lot depends in an LLC situation on whether or not there's one member or multiple members. But I would say that anecdotally, and Reed can weigh in if he's ever noticed this, but particularly in the area of the university, it seems as if quite a few of particularly the single family dwellings that are used for these types of short-term rentals are actually purchased by an LLC. So I think that in those situations, there is some intention by whoever owns it, whether it's someone who's graduated from UVA or what have you, to sometimes use that building as a place to stay themselves, but to also use it for sort of a commercial operation when they're not staying there themselves. Very much like a beach rental is a great analogy. And so it's really difficult. You don't want to base your regulations specifically necessarily on who owns it. But as I said earlier, it is a fairly easy place to draw a distinction to say if somebody's living there, it seems more like a home occupation, and the impacts are likely to be more similar to a home occupation versus if someone's not living there, it's more like, or not living there most of the time, it seems more like a business. And generally, like any other business, if it's managed well, it presents few problems in a mixed use district or a commercial district. If it's not managed well, it's going to cause problems wherever it is. So an LLC is just an indicator, but it's not a bright line test.
I was just going to say that in the past with LLCs, we actually require sometimes that people provide us with the LLC document showing that they're actually part of the LLC. So, the LLC might be owned by many people, and so they have to show that they are in fact on the deed. And so we can grant them an application that way. There are LLCs. Some of the LLCs that you see snapping up properties are tapping into a long-term rental market where they're not necessarily they're renting to 30 days or more, but they appear to look like the traditional Airbnb because it's like this nice renovated space and, looks very boutique and what have, what people who are renting Airbnbs want to live in, but they are actually, since the pandemic, where you're having people able to work remotely, they can stretch their dollar. If they have a New York City or a San Francisco job, they can come to Charlottesville and pay Charlottesville prices and get more bang for their buck. So I am seeing more of a trend of that because I've done I've gotten some complaints about some of these, and I've looked into it deeply, and they are in fact more than 30-day rentals. So there is some of that going on. Also, that going back where Todd said he had about 250 people registered with him, I also want to say that some of those are the by rights. You know, we had talked about where you have all the other zoning districts that allow for a hotel, and so all those are by right, and the homestay doesn't apply. So I don't think that there's a huge 125 applicant difference between you know, what I have for numbers and what he has. I think it's a lot smaller, but when you factor in all those other by right uses. But I like what all the people had to say. I have permits for all those people. Miss Watson, for instance, is like a property manager. And you know, that's something that people have to put on their application, is who a property manager is, if they in fact aren't the people or the person that's going to be on call if there is an issue. So sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so I mean, that makes sense to me. I'm not trying to like vilify LLCs here, and I certainly understand that you can have single owner LLCs or multi-owner LLCs. I'm just trying to make sure that there is no exemption whereby like you can have a company owning a house and get out of the owner occupancy rule or permanent residence rule. In fact, I would say that, like, you know, to me, it might make sense to make that owner occupancy rule more of a permanent occupancy rule, right? Like if you've rented a place for 5 years that has an extra room, like I don't see any particular reason why you renting that out as an Airbnb is different from you owning that house and renting out your spare room as an Airbnb. Obviously it is in our ordinance now, but you know, I want to be clear again that like there isn't a loophole.
No, so you're absolutely right. So you could have a single family dwelling in an R1 neighborhood, and that dwelling could be owned by an LLC. So what Reed has to figure out if he receives a report about that is if for example, that LLC is a single owner, then he should ask that single owner of the LLC, ask for the driver's license or something that shows what, you know, what their normal place of residence is. And if that driver's license or voter registration card or whatever document it is has a Florida address, then you know that's, you know, so it's the same process of information gathering as it would be if it weren't owned by an LLC. But as you can imagine, getting, you know, all of that information requires the zoning staff to rely on cooperation. And if they don't have cooperation, you know, then you have to figure out, how do I get the information I need to bring some sort of prosecution of a zoning violation in a courtroom? Because you still have to have evidence when you go. So they have a difficult job when it comes to these, and I think they've been doing a really good job overall. We've just got to figure out how to deal with, you know, ongoing, I guess what you call scofflaws, and figure out if there's a different way to get at that particular problem.
Okay, and then quickly, because I don't want to hog Reed, if I have a non-conforming, say, multifamily use in an R1 zone, that does not give me any right to run an Airbnb or a homestay without adhering to the homestay rules, right?
If the homeowner resides there in one of those units, then arguably they could rent out, you know, one of the other units. But no, if they don't reside there, that they have no right to rent it out.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Dowell.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, I had a hard time finding my mute button. I had a few comments and a couple of questions first. So my first comment, and then Reed, I had a couple of questions for you. I know you have 6 minutes, so I want to catch you before you go.
I'll give you guys an extra 5 if you need it. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that. But my first comment before I ask any questions is that as a planning commissioner who has been side by side with Mr. Lahindro, working on the comprehensive plan update and fighting feels like vigorously for the last 5 years for affordable housing, I do feel like us taking the time to address Airbnbs is not a waste of our time, but we could use this time to actually move the needle to do something helpful for the citizens of our community. So that's going to be my first comment. If there are more people who are operating correctly or not causing problems, to me, us taking a whole segment today to talk about something that's not really helping our community as far as providing more affordable housing seems like we're kind of moving backwards here. The second thing I would like to know is, because it doesn't seem like much has changed, especially if you say our ordinance is such a great ordinance, I would like to know how many complaints Reed has received. I would also like to know what area of the city those complaints are coming from, because I think I have a general idea of where they're coming from. We talked about this about 5 years ago, and we were under the impression then that most of the complaints were coming from the university area. And then I would like to know what you do once you receive those complaints.
Okay, I can't give you an exact number of complaints, but I can tell you that I get complaints all over the city, in every zoning district. 10th and Page, that gentleman, Mr. Lyons that came on, he's off of Cherry. I've talked to I've cited his neighbors who are doing something illegally. Not so much in Greenbrier. Not, it's very quiet over there. I don't think a lot of people really do it over there. But it is everywhere. I can get back with you with a tally of the number of complaints I've gotten. Once I do get it, I go online. The hardest thing to do is figure out where these illegal uses are, because if you use Airbnb or VRBO or what have you, it doesn't tell you what the address is. So finding like the general location. If I do get a complaint, it's helpful because normally I get an address, and then I start gathering evidence. I don't really want to say publicly what I do because it's kind of a secret, but I can tell you later. I don't want to, have people hide how they're operating illegally. And then I generate a notice of violation, give the person 30 days. If they don't comply, then we got to go to court. And most likely coming soon, we're going to be going to court this summer. So get ready, Lisa. In one extreme example, I have to say, most people comply. A lot of people don't know, and they want to get into compliance. And it's really the extremes that will get to court, because our ultimate goal is compliance. We're not making lots of money from going to court. We're just trying to get something back the way it's intended to be used. In one extreme example, the people could not comply, and they decided to sell their house. And the neighbors were ecstatic because they dealt with a terrible Airbnb that was terribly run, and it was noisy, and it was a quiet cul-de-sac. And I've got a great letter from the property owner next door, who's very happy now. So yeah, I'm sorry, was there another question?
No, I was asking where the locations was, and
Okay.
like I said, my comment more so is we're talking about it takes away from affordability, but have we ever asked ourselves the question as to why so many people in the city of Charlottesville, as some of our constituents even said during the public comment, feel like they need to operate an Airbnb in order to be able to afford to stay in the city? To me, that strikes a bigger iron. Why do people feel like the only way to be able to live in the city of Charlottesville is that you have to operate an Airbnb to have an additional income? The other thing I guess I have a hard time with is that we're sitting here debating apples and oranges when we have, and we've discussed this so many times that it's like, I feel like I want to throw up. We have neighborhoods that are somewhat affordable, and then you have these developers who come in, and if the regular home rates are roughly about $200,000 to $250,000 for a home, and then you let the developers come in and build these $400 to $500 starting price developments or new homes, to me, that seems like a more issue of pricing affordable housing out versus Airbnb, where people are making money to be able to afford to stay in Charlottesville. So that was my big comment. I just wanted to know how many complaints we have and what we're doing to enforce that. And then also, from what I know of Airbnb, I do know that when you make it so that that home has to be owner occupied at all times in order to have guests, you do really take away from that Airbnb experience that people are looking for, hence as to why they're not going to a hotel in the first place. If we have someone graduating from the University of Virginia, they don't necessarily want to stay at a hotel because they want to stay somewhere where the family can gather and have dinner space together. So I do think that's something that we should look into. Thank you.
Mr. Soliates.
I have questions and maybe comments will evolve from them. The number 6, it sounds like a magical number. Why 6?
I couldn't figure out why. That planning commission, the old planning commission decided that. There was no notes or, we didn't want to propose anything or any sort of number. So it was left up to them.
Would it be bad if the number was higher? For example, the number 8?
No, I think it depends on the house, right? Every neighborhood, the impact's going to be felt differently. Like I said, a lot of the complaints we get is that a bachelorette party with, 8 different cars just showed up because they drove from different locations. But others, where they all come together, or maybe it's a couple families. It really depends, right? And so a small house can't really accommodate 8 people. But a larger house might be able to. So, there's no cookie cutter answer in the city of Charlottesville.
Yeah. And then you should know as well that under the building code, depending on the height of a particular dwelling and how many bedrooms it has, I can't remember, I'm like Reed, I can't remember specifically how we got to 6 in the zoning ordinance. But in the building code, there could be a different number based on the characteristics of a particular structure. And then also in considering sort of what is the presumed reasonable occupancy of a particular residential structure, it's generally presumed that 2 people per bedroom is a reasonable rate of occupancy. So if you look at a lot of single family dwellings, there are very few that are going to have more than 3 bedrooms. So 6 seemed like, applying sort of that 2-person per bedroom rule. 6 seems like the upper limit that most houses, other than, some really big Victorian structure or something, itself might have, but a lot of those larger structures might then fall under the building code requirements. So there are some parameters out there.
The residential homestay versus commercial or mixed use. Does the 6 number apply differently? Are the regulations differ based on the zoning, or is it all the same regs?
The homestay with the 6 unrelated only applies where a homestay permit is required. So once you get to the commercial or mixed use, it's a hotel and it's not regulated by me. I mean, the use, the ability to do it is regulated by the zoning ordinance, but as far as numbers, it's not regulated by me.
Although that's an area that you could regulate if you wanted to.
Thank you. 2 uses sort of jumped to me. Residential, which is more sort of like a hotel. Like, this is a place that I want to stay, maybe cook a meal, maybe have a couple of people over, versus an event. This is I'm going to have a party with a lot of people and they're going to bring their cars. Is there a way to regulate or understand that, to distinguish those 2 uses?
No, I'm sure there is, and there's probably a precedent somewhere, but that was not really. We more thought about, is someone going to try to have events at like large events? Like, people have asked, can I have weddings? Can I have and I can't allow that, but it's hard to regulate how people use their house. For instance, someone who resides at a house, as their permanent residents, how can I prevent them from having a dinner party every single weekend where they have all these guests or a big backyard barbecue? There's no way to regulate that. So I think it would be really, really, really hard to do. But if you find something and want to pitch it, then certainly we can look at it.
Parking. I hear a lot about parking just all the time. Can we regulate parking? Could we require permits, something like that?
I don't know. I'm sure it would be hard to enforce. It would be kind of on the owner. I think some owners really try to restrict how many vehicles their guests bring. If you look on some of the Airbnb websites, it says it like, maybe, only can bring 2 cars or what have you. But unless it's a restricted parking zone where there's zone parking, it's hard to prevent. Anyone can park on a street. It's a public street. So, and it would be really hard to enforce. That would be calling on the neighborhood to come and help me enforce it by providing me with pictures and license plates and that kind of stuff. And I think it'd be hard to investigate because by the time I get that information, the cars are gone and the Airbnb stay is over. So, yeah.
Although you could, again, in your zoning ordinance, you establish minimum on-site parking requirements for different uses. If you called out this type of use in the mixed use districts as something that warranted its own set of parking standards, you could probably do it that way. I think, and Reed can correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's already components of parking regulations that go with a home occupation. So you're not supposed to use a lot of the spaces on the street for regular parking for people.
Right.
But so
yeah.
If you can figure out what would make an impact, yes, you could do it. But generally, in most areas, that's going to require increased on-site parking, which may or may not solve your problem.
I hate to cut out short, but I do have to be there at 7:15. So Craig Fabio is on the call and he is able to best as he can answer questions. Or if you have more questions, certainly email me and I will get back to you as quick as possible. Thank you very much. And I hope the rest of the discussion goes well.
Thanks.
Bye.
Jody, what do you got?
They've got one for Craig, sorry.
Jody's not your turn yet. Lyle's hogging the dice.
There's so much to talk about. Craig, do you collect demographics and income info for people using this program?
No, sir.
Basically,
theoretically, I suppose it could be, but that would be a honor system situation, I suppose.
Thank you. That's all I've got.
Well, Jody.
So as I recall, one of the main concern that Ms. Russell had and why we're having this conversation tonight is the impact that is the STR, short-term rental business, having a negative impact on affordable housing.
Yes.
I don't think we've heard anything that really addresses that. Have we?
Well, this is Craig. I will speak slightly to that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It was pointed out by one of the respondents that this provided them affordability, and this is something that we hear from folks: is the ability to do this is the only means they have to stay in Charlottesville. So there is that piece of it. I think it's very difficult to state that there's an absolute impact on affordable housing when our current market is something that anyone outside or those of us here might call obscene, insane. I don't know where the top is. I don't know what the answer to affordable is. And, it's middle income folks that have been able to get a foothold a good amount of them are using this as a means to maintain their homes. So there is at least some affordability there. But any actual evidence we've received that this program or short-term rentals legal or illegal are that it's hard. I don't think there's anything that we have any concrete either way.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what information we need to be able to make that assessment. And if that's even possible with the number of illegal STR rentals going on. So I don't know that this has helped the conversation, the concerns of why we're discussing it. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So just two thoughts. One, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It looks like it ain't broke. The other thought is that there are two things that might be broken, and that is moving to 183 days, maybe something we want to think about down the road. And the other thing that Mr. Divers mentioned is that chasing down $100 every year may be onerous and more work than Craig and Reed need to do. $100, a $100 initiation fee may be the way to go. So those are the only two things that I've heard that are broken on this. Otherwise, interesting discussion, but I wouldn't mess with it. The only thing I mess with is getting Reed some more help. But Ms.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, ma'am.
So I agree that this, I didn't ask for this discussion, but I did raise the issue because of the anecdote that I see on my street, which does have a number of duplexes, providing affordable housing, or at least some sort of subsidized housing, because I think there's members of IRC. Anyway, I'll make the link to the affordable housing plan and why this, I think, raises an issue we should discuss. We have approved an affordable housing plan that includes protections for lower income or marginalized communities, supporting tenants' rights, implementing and increasing subsidy programs, tax relief, rental assistance, right? That's all in our affordable housing program. These programs require more staff. And what I'm hearing from staff is they need help to implement the policies that are great, that are, state precedent, but we have to support our staff and make sure they are run and they're working for the people, and it's working when people follow them, and it's not when it's not.
Great.
Well, I just want to add, thank you for bringing that up. Additional staff up. I'm the one that submits the budget, and I intend to request for that position again. In the past we have requested that, and it hasn't been funded. And last year, due to COVID, all new positions were proposals were suspended unless it's critical. So based on the discussion tonight, and as always, what we have done during the next budget cycle, we are going to resubmit that request for additional zoning inspector and see what the budget team does with that.
If I could chime in, I've got a couple maybe action items or ways to kind of further look at the issue. And I'll say, I used to be pretty skeptical of the idea that short-term rentals had a significant impact on the supply of overall rentals. But I think the last year has given us a very significant natural experiment to kind of see the impact that they have, right? And one thing I've noticed from constantly browsing Craigslist and Zillow is that there have been a lot of fully furnished apartments on the market for long-term rental lately. I think more than I had seen in the past. But of course, that's entirely anecdotal. So one thing we could look at, and maybe this is, engaging the CCI team that produced that report, is take a look at the list of permitted locations that we had pre-COVID, see how many of them were put on the market as long-term rentals post-COVID. And maybe that will tell us, how many entire homes are being rented out, kind of long-term, that are not on the market because of short-term rentals. So I'm definitely very sympathetic to the argument that it's also helping people afford their places. And, to that point, I think, as I mentioned earlier, changing the owner occupancy rule to a pure permanent residency rule makes sense, so as not to exclude renters who are also having trouble affording their homes from being able to rent out a bedroom or even, the whole place for a weekend on homestay sites. And then lastly, it seems like the vast majority of the problem is a result of people who aren't complying with the rules at all and aren't registered. And, I think what I'm hearing from people in the community is that they're aware of Airbnbs that are not in compliance or are nuisances, but no one really has any idea how to support it, or to report it rather. So first off, if we could say exactly how that's supposed to be reported here now in this meeting, that would be great. And then secondly, maybe all we need is like a web form on the city website that is report an Airbnb violation. Here's a basic rundown of the rules. Please, here's a text box, tell us what it violated, and here's a space to upload images. Fill this in, submit the form, instead of saying, well, you need to contact the zoning administrator. To contact the zoning administrator, you need to go to the NDS website, find the staff directory, find the contact zoning staff form, etc.
Hey, Rory, I had a quick question for you. So I heard you say, and I'm just looking for clarification, that we should change it so that people who are renting currently or long-term tenants have the ability to do so. Wouldn't that be like releasing their lease? Would they need some type of okay from the actual homeowner?
Typically, yeah. I mean, I think usually
typically, or yes.
I think it depends on your lease, right? I think typically it's specified in your lease. Like I know my lease has a whole short-term rental section for that, which I guess implies that people are probably doing it without permission or maybe with, well, I guess it's by right in this zone. But I mean, yeah, that would depend entirely on your lease. So, but that would be between the renter and their landlord, I guess. So, allowing it on our end would allow them to do that in general.
I guess here's the question, or here's what would draw concern for me, because if your tenant is running an Airbnb and you have not approved or okayed that, when they go to look up who owns that property, the tenant's name isn't going to show up. The landowner or the homeowner is going to be the one who has to deal with the backlash of that. So I feel like if we're going to extend that, because I know that's something that we talked about the last time we looked at this, I definitely think it needs to come from the homeowner. A tenant is just a tenant. They can't supersede the homeowner, if that makes sense to you, because when they have a violation, they're not coming after the tenant, they're going to come after the property owner. So I definitely think if we're going to allow that, then the actual homeowner needs to sign off on an okay for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, if you're not in compliance, you could be doing it as a renter anyway now, but I think, yeah, like to have a sign off from the landlord or from the property owner makes sense. The change, I guess, would then be saying if the tenant is a permanent resident and is the one running it, they can do it as long as they have a sign off from the landlord. I mean, that seems reasonable to me if we were to make that change.
So Craig here. From an enforcement standpoint, that would be difficult. Also from a staff standpoint, the concern, which our attorneys may speak to as well, would be we would need to have the documents to state that the owner is allowing for this, because any enforcement we go after, it goes back to the property owner. So a bad actor as an operator, we would have to go after the owner, and things happen. An owner may not be aware of something, even if we have something in writing that says that an owner does. But on the flip side of that, all of the other home uses are available to a tenant. You can operate your landscaping business. You can operate your computer home repair, your hair salon as a tenant with a property owner permission. It does get a little bit different in a residential situation, and I think we'd be concerned about a much greater deal, and we'd certainly want to go through legal to make sure that there is an opportunity there.
Yeah, and I chime in to add, I believe the county has a concept in their homestay ordinance of a resident manager, where the owner is the one kind of signing off on the whole deal. But then there's a resident who is not the owner, and presumably a tenant in this case, is the one running the homestay. So I guess it might be useful to talk to county enforcement staff to talk about how they manage that. Sadly, we don't have one commission anymore.
So that is the same situation as the bed and breakfast, but the owner applies for that here, in our non-homestay, in some of the areas where it is allowable. Some of the areas you can just rent as a hotel. Some of the areas you are required to have an on-site manager, a live-in manager. So some of them have a small room that the manager lives in. Some of them have a separate apartment there, and it's not an area where there's an owner requirement, but there is an on-site person required. But the on-site person does not apply for that permit. It's the property owner that's applying for that, and they're being run in that manner.
Right. Ms. Russell, how would you like to land this?
Seems like Mr. Divers might have something to say.
Oh, did he? Mr. Divers? Look at it. Oh, there
I'm
he
just
is.
going to reiterate what Craig said, that, yeah, this is the only use I'm aware of, home occupation use that a tenant can't engage in. And I can tell you it happens, because I've spoken to many landlords who were not aware of it. But then I've also spoken to landlords who were perfectly fine with it, and would have blessed it had they known about it. And any, to answer your earlier question, any lease I've ever seen, if you did it without the landlord's permission, you were violating the lease.
Right, Liz, what are we doing?
Yeah, so going back to my, when you posed the question of what's my desired outcome, I said I'd like to know that our policies are sound, that staff are able to enforce them. And, I don't think we really we got to the question of what would more ADUs look like, and, increase density, would that exacerbate people taking advantage or not following the policy? It sounds like there's some minor tweaks that may be worth considering. I don't feel very strongly about that. I feel the most strongly about making sure we're supporting our staff in this and all, progressive policies that have good and worthy intent, and making sure we can support our staff in implementing them.
Great.
I want council to hear that as well, and city manager.
I think we've got one counselor on, but yeah, great. All right, are we a wrap on this discussion?
I just add, I looked up my lease just now, and it has a clause that I can do a short-term sublet, but I need to give the landlord 25% of the revenue. So.
Alrighty then. All right. Right, if we are done with that, thank you, Liz, for, I think it was a good thought process.
And I know
these
notes are going to, right, this is going to the consultant as part of the zoning update. So, maybe these minor tweaks could be considered as part of the zoning update, but probably don't need to be, we don't need to belabor the point tonight.
Yep, and they are online, so they're watching. So good. Right, Mr. Rice, I think we're ready to open it up to the public for comments about things that are not on the formal agenda.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. At this time, if you'd like to address the Planning Commission, please click your raise hand icon, or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. We'll call on you in the order of hands raised, and you'll have 3 minutes. And Rebecca Deeds has her hand up. Rebecca, you're on with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the all-volunteer nonprofit Preservation Piedmont. We thank the Planning Commission for your service, and we deeply appreciate the work you put into the proposed land use map. All the work put in by city consultants, staff, and commissioners. Preservation Piedmont wants a progressive and livable city for all residents. Housing in Charlottesville is too expensive, and we support plans that will ensure permanently affordable housing. Our organization has been providing input into the comprehensive planning process since 2017. We've met with several city council members and the consultant team, and we have some feedback to share. We're concerned the current plan will create greater displacement of historically marginalized communities in vulnerable neighborhoods like 10th and Page, Fifeville, Star Hill, and Rose Hill, due to proximity to the university, speculative development, and demolition. So we see clarity from the consultants regarding strategies they will use to protect those neighborhoods. We worry about widespread demolition of smaller, more affordable existing housing in favor of new and larger units to benefit upper income earners, resulting in considerable environmental degradation and waste. We want to see a plan that will incentivize and promote reuse of existing structures. And the proposed land use map does not reflect how these changes would interact with architectural design control and conservation districts in the city. The plan should address the potential effects of upzoning on cultural and environmental resources, such as the reduction in city tree cover due to new development. Such impacts will contribute to heat islands and also reduce shaded streets and sidewalks that encourage walking rather than driving. According to consultants' estimates, the proposed changes will produce only a small number of actual affordable housing units. At the November 2020 community meeting, the consultants stated that with mandatory inclusionary zoning and the possible broad land use changes, maybe 30 new affordable units and 12 new affordable ADUs per year could be anticipated. According to the housing plan, 4,000 units are needed. We would hope that the consultants, Planning Commission, and Council look at more details related to the land use map, taking into account city topography, its watersheds, and locations of resources like shopping, office facilities, and schools that could be walkable to new proposed housing. And we want to remind commissioners that the future land use map is only one of many tools provided to help exacerbate the affordable housing crisis. The Affordable Housing Plan outlines many other strategies outside of the land use plan, so that should move ahead while work on the land use map continues. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Rebecca.
And if anybody else has wants to address the commission at this time, please click your raise hand icon or press *9. Chair Mitchell, I see no other hands raised.
Right, thank you very much. And that will then conclude the public comment section. Ms. Creasy, are there any other items on our docket?
No, there are no other items for this evening.
Are there any other commissioner items?
I'd just like to put in a plug. If you have concerns about the affordable dwelling ordinance, please reach out to me. So I know your thoughts.
And do that pretty quickly because Missy Lyle and I are meeting to talk about that on Thursday. Is there a motion to adjourn? You guys just want to stay
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn into the second Tuesday of July.
Second.
Is there a second? Right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a
Good night. Thanks, guys.